Welcome to the Course Creators Podcast with course design expert Jenny Rice. Whether you're an experienced creator or just starting out, this podcast helps build courses that resonate, transform, and make an impact. Each episode, we'll explore strategies and tips to help you create engaging, successful courses. Let's dive in.
Hi, this is Jenny Rice from Course Creators Podcast. I'm so excited for our guest today. We've got Bart Paulson, who's the founder of datalab.cc. So welcome, Bart.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. So why don't you start? Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
So my name's Bart Paulson. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah in the US, and I come to course creation through sort of a roundabout way. I have three separate job titles, all of which connect to the same thing. The first of these is that I have a PhD in social and personality psychology, and I'm a professor of psychological science at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. I've been teaching at the university level for over 30 years, and I teach statistics to behavioral science students. And after many years of teaching that and trying to use some software in the class, my students started getting very anxious about the software. I started creating videos to show them how to use the software. We were using a program called SPSS in class at that time. That led to me getting contacted by several organizations, one of which was then lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning, to produce a similar course for them. And for the last 14 years, I've produced 40 English language courses.
Wow.
I'm doing one right now. I'll get back to it after we're done talking. 40 English language and about another 40 translations in different languages. And that's been a huge part of my work. And that's my most active content creation job. I also have my own company that you mentioned, datalab.cc. This is one I founded about 11 years ago. And Datalab is where I create content that I release on my own, although that is not something I've monetized. I've tried that in the past, but that's mostly for content that I share for free, and it's a way that I work with my business connections and some of the other projects that I do, such as I do an event called the Data Charrette, which is a service event with local nonprofits doing data analysis for them in short amount of time. So I do all those things, but my main gig as far as this one goes is the work that I do for LinkedIn Learning and the course creation there, as well as some of the experience I have with my company, datalab.cc.
That's great. What a varied background that brings you to, I think, a unique perspective to understand the learner, the end user, and what they need to know in order to, whether it's use software, use statistics or whatever, which is really wonderful because I like to look at, you need to know your audience group. What do they need to know at the end of any training so that they can, in their role and their experience and their background, perform what it is that you want them to perform. So, yeah.
And
Go
that's
ahead.
absolutely right. The hard part has been figuring out that my original assumptions about what they needed to learn may not have been the correct ones. So, for instance, I know that when I teach an undergraduate statistics class, the idea is always we're going to teach them how to be these statistical masters. And I've been with a lot of other professors who say, well, our job is to train them to be researchers and professors like us. And I go, well, I think that's true for less than 1% of my students. It's true for a small number, but I've got 800 to 1,000 students a year, and I imagine that two or three of them go off to research professions. Um, but I learned, for instance, that at the university, my students, the vast majority of them are planning on becoming therapists, which means they will also be small business owners. And so I'm trying to redirect my statistics training with them so that instead of this is about how research works in general, this is what you need to know to understand research articles when you're getting your continuing education credits. And this is what you need to do to be able to successfully run a small business. There is some overlap in those skills, and that's been really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you pivoted when needed, when you realized that the focus wasn't what the students needed, which is so critical because we can't make assumptions. We need to validate our assumptions. And like you got feedback saying, no, It's only, 1%, 2% of the people that actually do go on to do research. So I need to then change to my, more prominent learner audience to adapt it accordingly, which I find wonderful that you've done that. So that's great.
Yeah, it really was huge getting that. Another one is in my work with both LinkedIn and my professional work with Data Lab is learning that this is something I've developed entire courses on this. One that was with a company called Pragmatic Institute, and then developing a similar course for LinkedIn Learning, where our audience is working professional data analysts. But so they have the technical skills and they're already employed, but they often struggle with getting on the same page as their managers and their stakeholders and the people who are going to use the results. So they often say, "Well, I've done the analysis and here's the printout." And then the question always, so do we open our stores sooner or later? Do we build this new location? Do we sell this new product? Is that a yes or a no? I can't tell. And teaching them how to work in a business sense where you have to address ROI, return on investment. You
Mhm.
have to address what your organization is currently capable of doing, and you have to get them very clear guidance on, as a result of this analysis and these actionable insights, you need to do this and this and this. And that's hard because most analysts don't think of themselves as making specific behavioral recommendations, but just saying like, well, this is what data says. And so again, that's one where I've been able to find that some of the assumptions about what working analysts need, I think they always need new, more advanced tools. They say, no, actually, we need to go way back to the beginning and say, how can you make actionable insights directly related to your stakeholders' goals?
That's great. So you're connecting it with what they need to do and what information they have. And I like that you said to go back to the basics too,
Yeah.
right? That's great.
Yep.
So what are some of
That's
the courses you have on LinkedIn Learning?
well, my courses all relate in one way or another to statistics and data science, which I know a lot of people are kind of allergic to that. The funny thing about it is, I am not a math person. My background, from the time I was a tiny little kid until I was in my third year of college, I was going to be a designer. I was taking drawing classes and I was taking color theory and I was making things with clay and foam core. That was my intention, that I was through and through a creative person. And then through really kind of a bizarre sequence of events, I ended up switching into psychology originally with the intention of being a therapist, but very quickly going into a research field. That social psychology is a research field, it's not a clinical field. Um, and I ended up very reluctantly teaching a statistics class. And when I first got that, I was terrified, and I was really only a week or two ahead of the students as we went through it. But I've now taught statistics. I've taught over 100 sections of statistics.
Wow.
And I've created all of these courses. And what I've found about it is that while I'm teaching what is functionally a technical topic, I find that my background, both in the social sciences and my lifelong interest in the arts and design, have both been really, really influential in the work that I do with each of them.
That's great. So you have that creative perspective to think outside the box, but now love statistics. Sounds like it because you're so well versed in it. But I love that you've taken it from not a statistical expert, but what does the end user learner need to do with it? So it's application based versus just, theory based, which is really key when it comes to any really course.
It is key, and it's sometimes it takes a little while to figure out exactly what that's going to be. And so, for instance, the people who listen to your podcast, they create their own courses with an idea of who their audience is, and sometimes it ends up being very different from what you thought. I'll tell you, one of the things I've learned is that the majority of my audience is outside of the United States. And
Mm,
that was really surprising for me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm connected with people from about 180 different countries.
mm.
And when I do my own little video office hours each month, um, I get a huge number of people from outside of the United States. And so what that tells me is that I have a much broader range than I ever expected. Also, it means that the way I address things needs to be adjusted to work better with that very, very diverse audience. And I'm sure that's an experience a lot of the people in your who've listened to your podcast have had.
Yeah, it's about knowing your audience and exactly that. If you're, thinking your audience is US based, it turns out to be more diversity. What is their knowledge level? What is, their application? How do they need to learn it? Which is great. I did my master's thesis on cross-cultural training, so I find that part of it fascinating on how different cultures learn, how different cultures, even with their language skills, how it teaches them how they absorb information and things like that. So it's good that you're aware of it and that you bring in your creative hat to do that too.
Mhm. And as another interesting one is at my university teaching, I teach at an open enrollment university, and I get a really wide range of students. One of the things that also comes up is I get a lot of accommodations letters. So I have students who have um, often one kind of learning difference or another. And now it doesn't tell me what they are. It just tells me what accommodations I need to make, like the exams run longer or they have flexibility on attendance. And I actually set up my classes so that all those things are already baked in. Um, you may be familiar with the entrepreneurial mantra, eliminate, automate, and delegate.
Hmm.
And what I've done is I've started by eliminating so much of the stuff that would have to be adjusted and building in those accommodations at the very beginning. But it also means that when I'm creating my courses, when I'm creating my content, I deliberately try to think about people with different learning styles and in different situations. So I'm teaching statistics, but I have to do it for people who get extremely uncomfortable with formulas. And so I present everything first graphically, then as a series of written steps without using formulas or symbols. And then for people for whom the formulas are easier, I include that as well, but that's only as a third option after the other one. So I've been working really hard at making my content more accessible for people with a lot of different situations.
That's great. So you've looked at it not only from an outcome standpoint, but how do people get to that outcome? And
Yep.
there could be cultural differences, language differences, accessibility differences. And I love that you're proactively looking for those and identifying them so you can encompass and include and be an inclusive content, which is really great.
Now, when I just want to think about your audience, since you know your audience, what I'm assuming that not that many people are doing technical content like statistics and data science, but I like to think that my experience, I have some things that could be helpful for them. What would be most useful that I could share?
I think, well, you've already shared so much, which is really great. But what maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on is how do you take your content topics and make them into chunkable things? Because you said you've done over 100 courses on LinkedIn Learning, right? So how do you
Yeah.
identify how to get that material, not from a standpoint of delivery, but how do you chunk it up so that you've got all your subtopics and it flows well?
Well, that's something where having 30 years of teaching experience comes in really handy. Um, I know how long it's going to take to talk about something.
Okay.
Um, and I try to keep it short. Even though there are times like my videos for Data Lab, I would make very short videos. And interestingly, I've shared them for free with other organizations who then rolled them all up into like a single 6 hour long video. And that has worked out surprisingly well, but I try to keep my stuff much shorter than that. Um, I spend a lot of time outlining. And again, because of my experience, I have a reasonable idea of how long it's going to take to go through each topic. Um, and it does involve making a lot of hard decisions about, I love this particular topic, but it is just out of scope for what I'm doing. Most of my audience, um, I'm introducing them to the topic, so they're
Okay.
new to it. So I can't really get in the weeds of what they want. And on the other hand, I feel that by introducing them to something that I think is important, I can reach a much, much broader audience than I could otherwise. Um, what else?
Well, what I'm hearing you say too, again, and you're such a great example of following instructional and adult learning principles in that you identify your target audience, you look at what you want them, the outcome to be, the learning objectives, and then you create an outline based on your learning outcomes or objectives, right? And
Hmm.
then you chunk it up into topics and then you put your course together, which is the best way to develop content.
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is, spot on to create impactful transformational courses. You've already given so many
Thank you.
insights. That's
Thank
really
you very
great.
much.
Yeah. So as we end this podcast, do you have any tips for other course creators that we could leave them with?
Well, I've got a few tips. Number one is I know that I have my own particular approach to teaching things. I know that especially in the world of TikTok, where things are very, very fast and they're very bright, and on YouTube, where you get people who shout a lot in their videos, and it's let's put this like high maintenance video. That works well with some people, and some people are comfortable with that, and I realize that there's an audience for it, but at it's not what I'm comfortable with. My stuff tends to be a much calmer style. My videos, the ones that I make for Data Lab, have very low production, meaning they're screen recordings. They're not me, they're just screen recordings with a voiceover. And I just trim the beginning and the end, and we're good. And if you keep them short enough, if I make a mistake in the middle, I can just record it over again. Um, I have had feedback from people that when people have called me the Mr. Rogers of data science
Mhm.
and the Bob Ross of data science. And I had one person get back to me and say, well, I want you to know, I actually put your videos on repeat to help my baby fall asleep.
Oh, there you go.
And I took all of those as great
Yeah.
compliments that I'm a much calmer person than a lot of others. This and Um, and I make a point of bringing in my other interests. I will bring in I, I will bring in art. I when I'm talking about statistics, I'll say that ensemble modeling and machine learning is a little bit like Picasso's cubism and having multiple perspectives at the same time.
Mm.
And um, I'm married to a modern dance choreographer, and she and I have actually collaborated. I was able to take some of my work in data visualization and put it on stage for live performances,
Mm.
where it was a visualization of the dance, and that was a lot of fun. Um, Also, it took me a very long time to realize there are things I'm good at and there's things I really struggle with, and I really struggle with a lot of the business part. Event planning is a nightmare for me and running a business is very difficult for me. Consequently, even though I have my own business, datalab.cc, and I occasionally do consulting jobs, I've consulted with little local organizations. I've consulted with global nonprofits and global finance corporations. I've done a lot of that. But eventually realized it was good for me to partner with other people. So for event planning, I've learned to partner with other people for event planning. They can do that. I do a lot of my work for LinkedIn Learning because they do so much of the
Mhm.
business part of things, and it makes I feel more comfortable continuing in my role as a content creator where I discuss what I'm going to do with them. We agree on an outline. And then I just record raw video and send it in, and they do all of the editing, they do all the production, they do all the marketing. Obviously, it means I'm not getting all the money. I'm getting a small slice, but in this case, it's a slice of a very, very large pie. And so that has worked out well. And so for me, I find that using partnerships where you can, so you can focus on the things, I can focus on the things that I'm best at, and I can have partners do the things that not only I'm bad at, but they're good at and they enjoy.
Right.
That's really productive. And I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, there's still an opportunity to get partnerships with other people where you can each focus on your strengths and have better impact that way.
Absolutely. And it's about knowing your wheelhouse, what you're good at, what you like doing, and then either outsourcing or partnering with people. I do that all the time. People used to call me the outsourcing queen because I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm not good at it. I'm going to find somebody else who is, because you want to
Exactly.
be focusing on things one you love to that are revenue generating, and make an impact, which is really great. So you've given so many insights on those podcasts and ideas and reflections for people, and such a good example of a really impactful course creator. So I want to
Well,
thank
thank
you for
you.
all your input and your insights. It's been very, very, very informative.
Thanks, Jenny. It's been wonderful to be here.
Yeah. So this is Jenny with Course Creator Podcast with Bart Paulson. Thank you again, Bart, for being here.
Thanks for listening to the Course Creators Podcast. For more insights and to connect with a community of creators, join our Course Creator channel on The Great Discovery. We offer both free and premium memberships. Check the link below. Until next time, keep creating, inspiring, and transforming lives.